The town of Clearbrook was a haven of serenity, where life moved at a gentle, predictable pace. Nestled amidst rolling hills and lush greenery, its tree-lined streets exuded charm, and the warm smiles of its close-knit residents made it feel like a sanctuary. The mornings in Clearbrook were especially picturesque, with the sun casting golden hues on the cobbled streets and the sweet laughter of children echoing from the local park. It was the kind of place where people stopped to chat, shared recipes, and looked out for one another. That morning, Laura Harris, a glowing presence in her neighborhood, stepped out of her quaint white brick home. 6 months into her pregnancy, she radiated a serene joy that seemed to brighten the air around her. Her pastel maternity dress fluttered softly in the breeze as her hand instinctively rested on her growing belly. Laura often spoke to her unborn child, her voice a gentle melody of hope and excitement. "Today, we're making Dad's favorite lasagna for dinner," she said with a soft chuckle. "I think you'll like it too." Her husband, Jacob, was away on a business trip, and Laura was determined to make his homecoming special. As she walked to the local market, neighbors greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Laura. How's the little one doing?" called out Mr. Allen, the baker, from across the street. "We're both doing great, Mr. Allen," Laura replied with a radiant smile. "I'll stop by later for some cinnamon bread," Jacob's favorite. Clearbrook's idyllic morning, however, was about to take a shocking turn. Just as Laura crossed a quiet intersection, the screeching of tires broke through the calm. A police cruiser came to an abrupt halt near her, its aggressive entrance sending a jolt of unease through the air. Startled, Laura turned to see Officer Brian Dempsey stepping out of the vehicle. His towering frame and stern expression cast a shadow that seemed to drain the warmth from the morning. Brian was new to Clearbrook, but in a short time, he had earned a reputation for being harsh, unyielding, and often abrasive. His demeanor today was no different. "Stop right there," he barked, his voice sharp and authoritative. Laura froze, confusion etched across her face. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked politely, though her heart began to pound. Brian's cold eyes scanned her suspiciously. "Let me see your ID," he demanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Laura hesitated but complied, reaching into her bag to retrieve her identification. "I'm just heading to the market," she explained, her voice calm yet tinged with apprehension. Brian snatched the ID, glanced at it briefly, and then tossed it back with a sneer. "What are you doing wandering around here? You look suspicious." His words cut through her like ice. Laura's mind raced, trying to comprehend the accusation. A few passers-by began to gather at a distance, their murmurs blending with the rustling leaves. Some discreetly raised their phones, recording the unfolding scene. "I'm just shopping," Laura said firmly, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "I've done nothing wrong." Brian's face twisted with irritation. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped, stepping closer, his voice dripping with disdain. "People like you think you can do whatever you want." Laura felt her body stiffen. The officer's words were not only intimidating but laced with an unspoken prejudice. The onlookers watched in stunned silence, their unease growing with every word. "Officer, I'm not resisting," Laura said, her voice pleading yet unwavering. "Please, let me go." But Brian's temper boiled over. In a moment of sheer rage, he shoved her roughly. Laura stumbled, her gasp of shock breaking the silence. Before she could regain her balance, he delivered a brutal kick to her stomach. A collective gasp erupted from the onlookers as Laura collapsed to the ground, clutching her belly. Her cries pierced the morning air, filled with both pain and desperation. "My baby! Please, someone help!" Chaos unfolded as the crowd rushed to her aid. "Call an ambulance!" someone shouted, while others turned their cameras toward Brian, capturing his cold, unrepentant expression. The ambulance arrived within moments, whisking Laura to the Clearbrook Medical Center. Meanwhile, in a conference room miles away, Jacob Harris's phone buzzed on the table. Seeing the caller ID, his heart sank. It was Sophie, Laura's best friend. "Jacob," Sophie's voice trembled. "Laura's in the hospital. She's been attacked. The baby, it's bad. You need to come now." Jacob felt the world tilt around him. He left the meeting without a word, his mind consumed by fear and anger. Booking the earliest flight home, he clung to a single thought. He needed to be by Laura's side. At the hospital, doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize Laura and her unborn child. Sophie sat in the waiting room, her face buried in her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. When Jacob arrived, she stood and embraced him tightly, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. "What happened?" Jacob demanded, his voice shaking with urgency. Sophie recounted the horrifying events, her voice breaking as she described Brian's actions. Jacob's jaw clenched, his hands balling into fists. "What's his name?" he asked, his tone cold and deliberate. "Brian Dempsey," Sophie replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been trouble since he came here. But this is beyond anything we imagined." Jacob's eyes burned with determination. "He will pay for this," he vowed. Laura's surgery was successful, but the baby, born prematurely, was placed in intensive care. When Jacob saw Laura, pale and fragile in her hospital bed, he knelt beside her and held her hand gently. "The baby," she whispered weakly. "She's fighting," Jacob reassured her, his voice steady, just like her mom. Tears welled in Laura's eyes. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "No," Jacob interrupted softly, his tone firm yet tender. "This wasn't your fault, and I promise he'll never hurt anyone again." Unbeknownst to most, Jacob's past was far from ordinary. A former intelligence officer, he had spent years dismantling corruption and holding the powerful accountable. Now, he would call upon every ounce of his expertise to protect his family and ensure justice was served. Jacob wasted no time in setting his plan into motion. His first call was to Marcus Trent, an old ally and one of the best civil rights attorneys in the country. Marcus had built a career exposing corruption and dismantling abuse of power, making him the perfect partner for the fight ahead. "Brian Dempsey," Jacob said curtly when Marcus answered the phone. "He attacked my wife, put her in the hospital, and nearly killed my baby. I need your help to make sure he never gets the chance to do this to anyone else." "I'm on it," Marcus replied without hesitation. Within hours, the two were strategizing. Jacob's experience in intelligence gathering allowed him to uncover a slew of complaints against Brian from his previous precinct. These ranged from excessive use of force to falsified reports, painting a damning picture of a man who had abused his power for years. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on building a legal case that would stand up to any scrutiny. Videos of Brian's attack on Laura began circulating online, sparking outrage not only in Clearbrook but across the nation. Witnesses came forward, their testimonies adding weight to the growing pile of evidence against him. A petition demanding Brian's immediate suspension gained tens of thousands of signatures within days, as people from all walks of life united in support of Laura and her family. In Clearbrook, the community rallied behind Laura. Peaceful protests filled the streets, with signs reading "Justice for Laura" and "No More Abuse" carried high. At the forefront of the movement was Lucas Hart, a young man whom Laura had once mentored during a difficult period in his life. "Laura believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," Lucas said in an emotional video that quickly went viral. "Now it's time for us to stand up for her." Lucas used his tech skills to create a website, justiceforlaura.com, where supporters could donate to the family's medical expenses, sign petitions, and stay updated on the case. His heartfelt appeal resonated deeply, turning the local movement into a national cause. Meanwhile, Jacob continued his investigation. Through his intelligence contacts, he uncovered a paper trail linking Brian to a web of misconduct that extended far beyond Clearbrook. Bribes, cover-ups, and intimidation tactics were all part of Brian's history, and Jacob was determined to bring it all to light. The pressure on Clearbrook's police department mounted as the story gained national attention. Brian's colleagues, once complicit in his actions, began to distance themselves, fearing the growing backlash. Under immense public scrutiny, the department placed Brian on administrative leave, but Jacob wasn't satisfied. He wanted accountability, not just for Brian, but for the entire system that had allowed him to thrive. The climax of Jacob's efforts came when he confronted Brian directly. It was outside the police station, with reporters swarming and protesters chanting for justice. Jacob's calm yet commanding presence silenced the crowd as he approached Brian. "Brian Dempsey," Jacob said, his voice steady and unwavering. "You thought you could destroy my family, but now the world knows who you really are." Brian, once arrogant and untouchable, now looked cornered. The weight of his actions, amplified by the cameras and the relentless chance of justice for Laura, finally began to sink in. His bravado crumbled as he realized there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. Weeks later, Brian was arrested on multiple charges, including assault, misconduct, and falsifying reports. His resignation marked the beginning of a long-overdue reckoning for Clearbrook's police department. But for Jacob and Laura, the fight wasn't over. While Laura focused on her recovery and caring for their newborn daughter, Hope, Jacob and Marcus turned their attention to systemic reform. They worked tirelessly to push for changes in police accountability and oversight, using their platform to advocate for justice on a broader scale. Clearbrook, once a quiet and seemingly idyllic town, had become a symbol of resilience and the power of community. Peaceful protests continued, with residents demanding not only justice for Laura but lasting change within their town. Lucas's website became a hub for organizing and education, ensuring that the momentum didn't fade. At home, Laura's strength became a source of inspiration for everyone around her. Despite the physical and emotional scars of her ordeal, she poured her energy into raising Hope, whose name came to symbolize everything her family had fought for: resilience, love, and a brighter future. Standing on the steps of Clearbrook City Hall months later, Laura addressed the crowd that had supported her family through their darkest days. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of her journey. "This isn't just my victory," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "It's proof that when we stand together, we can create a better world for our children." Jacob stood beside her, holding Hope in his arms. "We've shown that love and determination can triumph over hate and injustice," he added. "But the fight isn't over. Let's keep pushing for what's right, for our families, for our future, and for each other." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers carrying a message of unity and hope. Clearbrook had been forever changed, transformed by the strength of its community and the unwavering resolve of a family determined to protect what mattered most. As Jacob, Laura, and little Hope walked back down the steps, hand in hand, they knew their journey was far from over. But they also knew they wouldn't face it alone. Together, they had proven that even in the face of unimaginable adversity, love and resilience could light the way forward. Clearbrook would remember this story for generations, a story of justice, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of family.